Alright guys, today we're going to take a look at, yes, another bicycle lock. That's because I got no fewer than a dozen requests from you guys. And I think it's a function of this being summer. Everybody's got a new Christmas bike. They want to start riding it. They don't want to take a chance of losing it. So everybody wants to get a decent lock. Let's find out if this is one of them. On the front is written wheel up. And I got this off of eBay. The title of it is, and this is pretty complex, it's a mouthful, MTB Bike Motorcycle Scooter Bicycle Foldable Security Anti-Theft Lock. $26.50 all the way from Hong Kong. So I think the origin makes you a little question a little bit what the materials and what the reliability is like, but let's take a look at it. First of all, it comes in this pretty cool red plastic cover, and it, for once, it holds it very solidly. And that's because they got a little detent that you have to push in order to remove the lock. And there's a little cutout right here. And when you look in there, you can see that it is spring-loaded. So pretty cool, but you'd think, well, did they use their head? And they did. So if you don't, it's dark and you can't see which way the logo's facing, it doesn't matter. No matter which way you put this thing in there, there's going to be a notch. So they did engage their brain pan at least a little bit on this guy. The fastener or the mount is fastened to your bicycle in a couple of different ways. If you have threaded holes on the frame of your bike, you can use these metric screws, and they throw in an Allen screw. So very easy to mount it through using the mounting holes here. If you don't have mounting holes, or if you want to mount it in kind of a weird place, they have these Velcro mounts. They are rubberized, pretty tough looking, and they'll go through the holes on the back of the mount to really strap it, and those rubberized finishes on the inside will hold it very solidly on your bicycle. All right, let's take a look at the lock itself. It's obviously the banded type lock. So you open it, you wrap this around a tree or a post, slide it through the frame of your bike, and then these are all hinged. So it looks like it would provide pretty good security. But you know they had to cut some kind of corners, and our job here is to find out what they are. Let's first take a look at the lock itself. These are becoming the bane of my existence, these slider locks. They are incredibly difficult to pick, and I've got several of them. I think I only raked one open by pure luck in all of the many, many hours of attempting. I did not get this one open. I only spent about an hour and a half on it, though. I tried everything from raking it to single pin picking it. I tried wrapping it. I tried the pick gun. I tried everything you can imagine, even jiggler keys, trying to get those things in the right place. And that's because they don't tension. When you apply tension to this lock, and there's a shutter lock inside of there, you can see it's spring-loaded. You can tension it, but none of the sliders bind up. So you really have no idea which one to pick. You kind of have to know exactly where they go, because if you don't, it's 100% luck trying to find out the positioning. So lock-wise, I think I'm not going to be able to get into this. So they did a pretty good job there. But there's all kinds of other physical attacks that we can take a look at. Let's first see how it works. Again, you take your key, you slide it in there, you rotate it 90 degrees, and then on this side, the locking pawl slides into that little cutout, that groove, and you unlock, he slides right out of there. Pretty cool mechanism. We'll take a lot closer look at that in a few minutes. But the first thing I want to take a look at is this guy. He does jiggle around a little bit. It seems to me that he could be a possible weak point. And when you look over here, there's a little plastic cover. And so my first attack is always the easiest one. I always want to hit the easy button. So if I can do something to loosen that locking lug and then just pull this locking bar away, that would be ideal. So the first thing I like to do, let's go ahead and pop this plastic cover off. There may be a pin or a nut or something in there we can take off, and bam, we're going to be in. If not, we'll try something else. All right, guys, that little plastic disc popped out of there with like practically no effort. I probably should have just done it on camera, but unfortunately, we're looking for corners that the manufacturers cut. This isn't one of them. The locking pawl, it looks like it passed through the metal bar, which is encased in this heavy black plastic, and the end of it is flared. So I don't believe that that's going to be a weakness we can exploit. I did try to pry it apart to try to snap it, but no luck there. So that will not be a weak point, but don't give up. There's some other attacks we can try. Let's keep looking at this locking mechanism. the next one I'd like to try, let's get the key in. I'm going to rotate it and we're going to open it up. Let me set this aside, and I'd just like to show you the locking mechanism itself. When we rotate this key, you see that locking gate rotating around there? Notice how he doesn't go all the way around. That is fully locked and I can pull the key out. That means that this little piece over here is unsupported at all. There's nothing holding him in place. He's not passing into a chamber to support that side of the locking wing. The other thing I like to take a look at, and that makes me think it might be a weakness, let's open him up and put the locking pawl back into it and lock him up. You'll notice it moves back and forth. There's a lot of play inside of there, which tells me that that wing is kind of hanging out there free by himself. No support whatsoever except on the very end. I'm thinking maybe if we took something like this, stuck it in this slot that they conveniently gave us, struck it with a hammer, maybe we can break that locking pawl off, get this lock open. I'm thinking it's possible because I do have a new hardness tester. I did check that locking wing and he checked in right here, right at about Rockwell HRC 45, which is like a cheap hatchet. I mean, it's not that hard a steel. Every chance we'll be able to snap him off. If not, well, we'll find something else. All right, guys, that went a little bit quicker than what I thought. Here's the broken off locking wing. You can see that it sheared off perfectly in there. Now, of course, this slides in pretty freely. It does get caught up just a little bit. It wasn't a perfectly clean shear. You saw I had to hit it with a hammer on the top here. With a little jiggling, it does come out. So that's a valid attack against this lock. It's almost like they planned for it. I mean, they gave us this neat little slot in which to act as a guide for our chisel to go right down inside of there. Anyway, the lock is undamaged. So the lock still does work. So there's unlocked and there's the old lock. And you can see the residue of the broken off locking wing. So from this point forward, I am going to keep attacking it. It'd be too short of a video otherwise. Let's pretend that that didn't work. So let's try one more thing. The first thing that jumps out of mind, this locking lug. I did check it with the hardness tester, and this guy comes out, this locking lug here comes out about HRC between 50 and 55. So pretty hard stuff, but he's not very thick. So if you were up inside of there, and let's assume, of course, that he's locked, there's a gap here, and pretty large air gap, in fact. Well, it's of course wide enough for someone to fit a hacksaw right in there. So perfect, again, a guide for the tool of the thief to get at one of the softer components. Let's clamp this up as if it's locked, and I will see if I can hacksaw through that thing. All right, that was not impressive by any stretch of the imagination. Again, another weakness, the very thin diameter of the locking pawl. Even though it's hard stuff, because it's so thin, it didn't take that long to saw through. So that, of course, would be a no-go. I mean, it's sheared off. And again, it provided perfect alignment for the thief's tool to go right down the side of there. Sheared it off clean. All right. let's presume that that didn't fail. Let's try something else. Let's look at another weakness, and that would be the hinges. On these hinges, I've drawn a line on here. You can see they put the pin in from this side, so the large diameter hole in this arm, and allows it to rotate freely. When it got through the other side, they pinned it over, they rounded it or flared it on this side, so it prevents it obviously from popping off. Gives some level of resistance. So my first thought was to take a giant chisel, get myself a giant hammer, and just start beating it, but that's a lot of work. So instead, I think I can probably do a better job on this and much quieter by taking a pair of bolt cutters. I can't cut it this way, I know that. I think we know that, but I'm going to take my bolt cutters and put it in there, and the idea the jaws of the bolt cutter will be pressed in there with great force, and it'll force these arms apart, and it'll do one of two things. It'll shear that pin, which we know is probably not that great a quality and probably not very thick, or it will overcome that flared portion, shear it off, and break these two arms apart. That's the theory. Let's give it a try. Well, guys, that was a heck of a lot easier than using a chisel, I got to say. That hydraulic pressure from those jaws really made quick work of this thing. This is what the pins look like. They sheared. I didn't actually cut all the way through. I got part of the way through, and then they just popped. So I decided to check the metal, again with my file Rockwell tester, and it only goes down to 40. 40 definitely makes a mark, so it's 40 or less. So they cheaped out on these pins that hold these links together. Well, when this thing busted apart, now I'm looking at the internal part, the little metal rod itself, encased in plastic that kind of disguises it. Let's bust off. Let's first of all add this and add this to our growing pile of scrap metal. Let's take this arm. I'm going to break off the plastic. Let's take a good look at the link that's underneath this, do a hardness test on it, and then see if we can cut through with a hacksaw, how fast that goes. All right, guys, a couple licks with a hammer, and this piece of plastic just broke right off. Into the pile it goes. Beneath there is this pretty thin, looks like a punched out piece of mild steel. I did measure it. It again comes out lower than I can measure. So it's 40 or less. I'm going to clamp this up in a vise, and let's see if in fact, I'm going to cut through this one. We got plenty of links. I'm going to cut through and see how long it takes to do with a hacksaw. All right, guys, we knew that this was less than 40, but I didn't think it would be that far below HRC 40 on the Rockwell scale. I cut through this faster than I could have hoped for. I mean, it was just amazing, like a hot knife through butter almost. So what they've done is they've taken a really crappy grade of steel on these links, and they've covered it up with some really nice looking black plastic to disguise it. So to the uninitiated, you're getting a pretty junky lock. But let's not stop there. Let's assume that didn't fail. I've got one more thing here. Running out of place to keep all the scrap. The lock is still good. It's got a broken locking pawl, but the key still works in this thing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am not able to pick the slider lock. But years ago, the Abloy lock had a defect. They took something shaped like a key, they stuck it in there, and they put incredible torque on it, and they sheared the locking mechanism. Now, a lot of you guys say, why don't you use a slam hammer? Well, the way this thing's put together, the lock is actually inserted from this side. So if none of this stuff had failed, this whole face is steel, and then there's a 1/4 inch of plastic there. So you're not going to be pulling the core out. But I'm thinking using that old Abloy technique. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a master key. I'm going to make it out of this old socket extension. I'm going to grind this down so that it will fit into that keyway, roughly the shape of that key. So a lot of grind in there. I'm going to attach it to my ratchet and then slide it in and see if I can torque it and shear off the locking mechanism and get it open. Let's see if I can make that happen. All right, guys, it's not a really pretty master key. Hopefully it is a master key. We'll find out in a minute. I ground it down as close to the dimensions as I could get it for the key. We got the right length. We got pretty much all the right dimensions. I did leave it a little bit thicker because I wanted to keep the strength. In the course of fitting it, I did spring the shutter mechanism. It's not popping out anymore, but the lock still works perfectly. And when the key's out, of course, it doesn't turn. So what I'm going to try to do is just take my master key, slide it in there, and I'm going to get a hammer and drive it in. I really don't care. This lock's never going to be used again. I'm going to drive it in there and then attach my ratchet, put some incredible torque on it, and see what it takes to shear the locking mechanism so we can get it open. Well, guys, offhand, I'd say this master key worked out pretty good. That's definitely going to the bag of tricks. I'll hold on to that. The lock will never be the same. The key no longer works, but a screwdriver does, and I'll try to do this kind of an odd angle, but I tried to show this at the workbench, but I think you can see the actuator turning in there. So we've sheared the locking mechanism inside of this slider lock, so it's totally busted. The actuator does turn a little rough because there's broken stuff all up inside of there, but it doesn't matter. The rest of this lock is pretty much broken too. That's not going to be much of a giveaway. I'm definitely keeping this. No one's going to sign up for it. So the giveaway, just to sweeten it up, for all of you guys who are always asking me for that Chinese stuff, I'm going to let you win some Chinese stuff. I've had this laying around for a while. I accidentally bought 2 of these when I did the review. You'll get this Chinese pick kit. I wasn't too happy with this, and you probably won't be either, but you're going to get it. But to sweeten it, I'm also going to give you a Mad Bob's pick kit, a set of Mad Bob's blanks, so if you don't like what's in there, you can use these to make your own. And donated by learnlockpicking.com. This is their jackknife lockpick set. So very cool, complete with instructions. They call it the Compact Jackknife Folding Lockpick Set. All that's going to be a much better giveaway than that pile of stuff, which is going to go into the trash. If you guys would like to win this stuff, though, all you got to do, there it is, guys. Go there. Big purple button. Click it. Register. And next Saturday, hopefully, you'll be the lucky winner of all this stuff. Stay safe. Stay legal. Stay away from MTB locks.